3 miles down, in the crushing blackness of the Pacific abyss, a steel behemoth lay silent. It was the Soviet submarine K-129, a 2,000-ton vessel carrying not just nuclear missiles and cryptographic machines, but the bodies of 98 sailors. For Moscow, it was a ghost, a tragic loss, written off and swallowed by the unforgiving deep. But Washington knew. Washington knew precisely where it was. And they had a plan. A plan so audacious, so fantastically ambitious, its cost would equate to $5 billion today. It would involve a reclusive billionaire, a ship built with a hollow moon pool large enough to consume a submarine whole, and a colossal mechanical claw, nicknamed Clementine. This was the blueprint for the greatest heist in history. To steal an entire Soviet submarine from the ocean floor, directly under the gaze of a Cold War enemy. The year was 1968. The Cold War raged not in the skies, but in the silent depths. In March, the K-129, a Gulf-class ballistic missile submarine, slipped its moorings on the Kamchatka Peninsula. Its mission, a routine deterrent patrol. On board, 3 SSN-4 nuclear missiles, each a city killer. And in its safes, the cryptographic manuals that unlocked all Soviet naval communications. 4 days into its patrol, the transmissions stopped. A chilling, absolute silence. The K-129 had vanished. The Soviet Pacific Fleet mounted the largest maritime search of the era. Aircraft painted the sky. Trawlers dragged the ocean. Destroyers carved frantic patterns across the waves, their sonar pinging into a void that offered no reply. They found nothing. After weeks of desperate searching, Soviet intelligence concluded the worst. A catastrophic onboard explosion had sent the submarine and its crew to a watery grave. For Moscow, the file was closed. What the Kremlin did not know was that the United States had quietly woven a secret web across the ocean floor. The Sound Surveillance System, or SOSUS, a network of hydrophones, an invisible tripwire laid across the globe, constantly listening to the whispers of the deep. It was this network that registered a faint but distinct acoustic event, the unmistakable sonic signature of a submarine hull imploding under pressure. The sound of the K-129 dying. While the Soviets searched thousands of square miles of empty ocean, the Americans had a precise location, a single point on a map. A treasure chest of Cold War secrets waiting in the dark. The ghost that Moscow had given up for lost was about to become the target of the most elaborate covert operation the world had ever seen. In the vast, silent expanse of the Pacific Ocean, 1,500 miles northwest of Hawaii, the water holds a secret. It began with a sudden, violent convulsion deep beneath the waves, a cataclysmic rupture that registered on underwater listening posts as a single, fleeting acoustic event, before fading back into the crushing silence of the abyss. No one saw it. No one knew what it was. Except for those who listened for the ghosts of the Cold War. This was the death of the K-129, a Soviet Gulf II-class ballistic missile submarine, vanished from the face of the earth. While Moscow mounted a frantic public search, American naval intelligence listened and heard only silence. They knew, and in that knowledge, they recognized an opportunity of unparalleled scale. Not a sound was made. No alert was raised. Instead, a set of precise coordinates was quietly fed into the most secure channels, destined for a unique vessel already prowling the depths. The USS Halibut. This was no ordinary attack submarine. It was a marvel of clandestine engineering, a creature of the Cold War, refitted for a singular purpose: espionage in the deepest, darkest corners of the planet. It was equipped with advanced deep-sea photographic equipment, a silent hunter designed to stalk secrets, not ships. It slipped into the designated area, a phantom in the abyss, and commenced its grim survey. From its belly, it deployed an experimental camera sled, a fragile, tethered eye sent down into a world of eternal night. Its powerful lights sliced through an eternity of black, illuminating a landscape never meant for human eyes. And then, it found it. Miles below the surface, the halibut began to systematically photograph the tomb of the K-129. Back in Washington, in darkened rooms, the images flickered across screens, revealing a scene that defied belief. The analysts were stunned. The submarine had indeed imploded, a catastrophic failure of its hull under pressure that no steel could withstand. But the photographs revealed something more. The forward 130-foot section, the prize, containing not one, but 3 nuclear missiles, and, crucially, the cryptographic code machines, was lying remarkably intact. It rested on the seabed at a staggering 16,500 feet. One admiral, staring at the grainy photographs, is said to have muttered just 5 words. "That's a gold mine sitting down there." He wasn't wrong. It was a gold mine of intelligence, a treasure trove of Soviet secrets waiting to be plundered if only they could reach it. The very idea was preposterous. Before 1968, the deepest successful salvage operation had barely breached 1,000 feet. This was an attempt to snatch something from over 3 miles down, a depth where the pressure is so immense it doesn't just crush, it erases matter. A place where light has not touched the seabed since the dawn of time, and where the cold is absolute. It was an engineering challenge on a scale never before contemplated. Yet the potential intelligence haul was simply too tantalizing to ignore. The nuclear warheads, their intricate firing circuits, the cryptographic machines that held the keys to the entire Soviet naval communication network. This wasn't just a tactical win, this was a strategic checkmate in the Cold War. So, in the summer of 1969, 1 year after the K-129 vanished, the CIA's Deputy Director for Science and Technology convened a small, clandestine group. Their meeting place was a nondescript basement office in Langley, Virginia, a room appropriately nicknamed the Black Chamber. These were not bureaucrats. They were the agency's brightest, most innovative minds in engineering and clandestine operations. Their mandate was clear, if seemingly impossible. Figure out how to raise a 1,750-ton section of a Soviet submarine from 3 miles beneath the ocean surface. And do it all in total secrecy, without the Soviets or anyone else ever finding out. Fueled by endless coffee and the sheer audacity of the task, the engineers began to work. They sketched out concept after concept. They brainstormed, they debated, and they discarded ideas that ranged from the brilliant to the absurd. They were not just trying to solve a problem, they were attempting to write a new chapter in the laws of physics, all while hidden in the shadows. For deep below the Pacific waves, the silent wreck of the K-129 lay waiting, a Cold War ghost, guarding the most valuable secrets on the planet, resting in a place that was supposed to be unreachable. A tomb that was about to become the target of the most ambitious heist in history. The options laid out on the table ranged from the merely difficult to the utterly insane. First, a fantasy of human endeavor. Send divers, armed with torches, to carve the prize apart, piece by painstaking piece. But at 16,500 feet below the waves, this was not a mission. It was a suicide note. The technology was a specter, a ghost of a future not yet arrived. The human body, a fragile vessel of flesh and bone, would be crushed into nothingness by the sheer weight of the ocean, long before it could even register the abyssal cold. Impossible. Then came the second proposal, a concept bordering on science fiction. Flood the forward section of the wreck with a buoyant foam, a chemical miracle that would lift the tons of dead steel from its resting place. While creative, the idea collapsed under the weight of its own questions. How could anyone inject enough foam at that crushing depth? How could they possibly control the ascent? It would be a ghost, rising from the abyss, uncontrolled, unpredictable, threatening to shatter into 1,000 pieces on its journey to the light. It was a non-starter. And then, a third path emerged, one that seemed to defy all logic, yet held within it the cold, hard glint of possibility. It was a plan of breathtaking audacity, to build a custom ship, a leviathan of the seas, to equip this vessel with a giant mechanical claw. This colossal hand would be lowered on a steel pipe string, a spine so long and so thick it would be an engineering marvel in itself, reaching down through miles of black water to the ocean floor. It would find its target. It would grasp the submarine, and then, slowly, meticulously, it would haul its catch up, not alongside the ship, but inside it, swallowing the secret whole, completely hidden from the prying eyes of the world. This monumental undertaking was given a name, Project Azorian. To the few insiders who truly understood its scale, it had a simpler, more visceral title. They called it the Monster Claw. A plan born of desperation, of genius, and of the pervasive paranoia that defined the Cold War. To build a monster is one thing. To hide it in plain sight is another. Executing Project Azorian was a challenge of physics. Keeping it secret was a challenge of psychology. In an age of spy satellites, a 618-4 a story. A cover so plausible, so utterly mundane in its ambition, that even the most suspicious Soviet intelligence analyst would glance, shrug, and move on. The Central Intelligence Agency needed a frontman, a name that resonated with cutting-edge ocean engineering, but also with a profound, almost mythical eccentricity. They needed a ghost. His name was Howard Hughes. By the 1970s, Hughes was less a man and more a legend. A billionaire industrialist, a film producer, an aviation pioneer. He was also a notorious recluse, a phantom in his own life, whose every rumored move, or lack thereof, was feverish fodder for the tabloids. His name was a brand, synonymous with grand, ambitious, and often bizarre projects that pushed the boundaries of the possible. He was the perfect eccentric genius to stand at the helm of such a wild endeavor. The agency approached his holding company, the Summa Corporation, with a proposition of breathtaking scope. Hughes, through his company, would publicly announce and pretend to bankroll a pioneering deep-sea mining venture. The stated target? Manganese nodules, potato-sized rocks, richens. This was not some far-fetched fantasy. Deep-sea mining was a real, emerging academic and industrial interest at the time. The cover story dovetailed perfectly with genuine scientific and commercial pursuits, cloaking the future vessel in an aura of legitimate, even trailblazing purpose. It was the perfect mask for a monster. A plausible quest for treasure to hide an impossible hunt for secrets. To lower enormous pipe strings into the abyss without raising a single eyebrow required a perfect lie. And the perfect lie required the perfect frontman. A man so eccentric, so reclusive, that any outlandish venture attached to his name would seem not just plausible, but expected. Howard Hughes, a phantom haunting the penthouses of his own empire. For more than a decade he had not spoken to the press, a ghost in the machine of American industry. When the Central Intelligence Agency approached him, he surprisingly agreed. His price was not merely monetary. He demanded a slice of stock options in the supposed mining venture. But his true compensation, the one he valued above all else, was a guarantee of absolute, ironclad secrecy. For a man pathologically obsessed with privacy, this was not a mission. It was a kindred spirit. Overnight, the story was born, meticulously crafted by CIA wordsmiths and fed to an unsuspecting world. Press releases heralded the arrival of the Hughes Glomar Explorer, a revolutionary vessel poised to dredge the ocean floor for a fortune in manganese nodules, a new frontier of wealth waiting at the bottom of the sea. The media, hungry for a grand narrative of progress and power, devoured it whole. Trade magazines published glowing features celebrating the audacity of American innovation. In Moscow, Soviet naval attachés, diligently archiving clippings from Western newspapers, filed their routine reports. A billionaire was building a massive deep-sea mining ship. There was nothing to see here. The ruse was not just alive, it was thriving. A masterful piece of theater playing out on a global stage. No one suspected that beneath the veneer of commercial enterprise lay one of the most audacious espionage operations in history. 1. At Sun Shipbuilding in Pennsylvania, the keel of an unprecedented vessel was quietly laid. This was not a ship in any conventional sense. It was a vessel born not of commerce, but of clandestine ambition, a floating, self-contained, deep-sea recovery platform designed for a single, impossible task. The hull had to be colossal, a silhouette that defied naval convention, stretching longer than 2 football fields, 618 feet of steel and secrets. Its most defining feature was a cavernous central bay, a massive rectangular void running through the very heart of the ship. Engineers gave it an ingenious, almost poetic name, the Moon Pool. This opening to the sea below was the project's architectural soul, a revolutionary design that would allow the colossal claw and, eventually, its prize, to be drawn up directly through the vessel's core, completely shielded from the prying eyes of spy satellites and curious onlookers. A secret chamber, hidden in plain sight. But simply arriving at a remote point in the vastness of the Pacific was not enough. The ship would have to wage a constant war against the unseen forces of the deep. It had to remain anchored to a single, invisible spot in the ocean, with a precision that bordered on the supernatural, even while dangling 3 miles of pipe in current. This challenge demanded a new level of engineering. A network of computer-controlled thrusters was installed around the hull, each a powerful engine of correction. They were the muscles of the machine, tasked with keeping the ship stationary within a mere 10 feet of its target. At the heart of this intricate dance, powerful IBM mainframes served as the ship's nervous system. They processed a constant stream of sonar data, acoustic whispers from the abyss, translating the ocean's every push and pull into precise commands. Every second, the propellers of the thrusters would adjust, countering the planet's own movements. The system was called dynamic positioning, a technology borrowed from the world of offshore oil rigs, certainly, but never before attempted on this scale, or for a purpose so critical. It was the digital ghost in the machine, holding a 600-foot steel illusion perfectly still, 3 miles above a secret it was built to steal. Deep within the steel labyrinth of the ship's hold, a heart of German engineering beat in silence. It was a crane, a marvel of mechanical muscle, designed and built for a single, impossible purpose. Its articulated arms possessed the strength to hoist a weight of 2,000 tons from the ocean floor, an unimaginable power hidden from the world. Yet this was merely the instrument. The true centerpiece of this audacious theater, the star of the operation, lay in pieces. It was concealed in the cavernous gloom of a dockside warehouse, shrouded in canvas and secrecy. This was the claw. A titan's hand, forged from a chrome molybdenum alloy, a metal chosen not for its shine, but for its absolute refusal to yield. It was engineered to withstand the colossal, bone-crushing pressures of the abyss, a place where ordinary prying eyes of naval intelligence and the public press. The men who bolted together this metallic leviathan with a dark, knowing humor gave it a name. They called it Clementine, after the lost daughter in a mournful folk song. The CIA officers observing the work, men of cold pragmatism, had a simpler, more direct term. To them, it was merely the grabber. This was the tool that would descend into eternal darkness. This was the hand that would attempt to snatch a ghost from its watery grave. By the early months of 1974, after years of meticulous planning and silent construction, the Hughes Glomar Explorer was ready. It did not launch with fanfare. It slipped away from the Philantid toward the vast, unforgiving expanse of the open ocean. On board, a crew of 178 souls had been assembled. Each one was carefully selected, their backgrounds scrutinized, their loyalties confirmed. Yet, the vast majority of them were operating in the dark, fed a plausible but entirely fabricated story. They believed they were pioneers in a revolutionary deep-sea mining venture. Mingling among them, indistinguishable from the geologists and engineers, were 60 CIA operatives. They moved with an easy confidence, playing their roles as oceanographers, their true purpose buried beneath layers of deception. The ship's ultimate destination was a secret of the highest order. A single set of coordinates, a lonely point in the Pacific Ocean, known to perhaps only 10 men on the entire vessel. The full operations order was sealed, locked away in secure safes, a testament not just to compartmentalization, but to the absolute necessity of silence for a mission of this magnitude. Deep in the vessel's core, the true work began. Engineers commenced the painstaking process of deploying the drill string. 17,000 feet of 1-inch thick steel pipe lowered into the sea, one 40-foot segment at a time. Each piece was threaded to the next, a slow, methodical assembly, creating a colossal, miles-long conduit connecting their world to the one below. When fully extended, this immense steel spine would weigh an astonishing 4,000 tons. The naval architects had run the calculations again and again. The numbers told a chilling story. If the claw, gripping its multi-ton prize 3 miles below, were to suddenly lose its hold, the recoil would be catastrophic. The sudden, violent release of 4,000 tons of tension would send a shockwave up the pipe string, a wave of pure kinetic energy that could, theoretically, capsize the entire vessel, pulling it down into the very abyss it sought to conquer. It was a terrifying possibility, a specter that haunted the thoughts of every senior officer. Yet the mission proceeded. The intelligence prize waiting on the seafloor was deemed too valuable, too critical to the balance of global power, to be abandoned out of fear. The journey to the recovery site took 18 days. 18 days across a seemingly empty ocean that was, in reality, anything but. The Glomar Explorer soon found itself shadowed. Soviet fishing trawlers, bristling with antennas and listening devices, appeared on the horizon. They were not there for fish. They were floating signals intelligence stations, unblinking electronic eyes, monitoring every transmission, every flicker of radar. The silent, deadly cat-and-mouse game of the Cold War was now being played out, in real time, upon the vast and lonely stage of the Pacific. On the sun-drenched surface of the Pacific, a carefully choreographed performance was underway. For the ever-watchful Soviet spy ships, the Hughes Glomar Explorer was nothing more than an ambitious, perhaps even foolish, mining vessel. The crew played their part to perfection, running elaborate drills, their movements simulating the collection of manganese nodules from the seabed. They sold the act with a theatrical flourish, heaving buckets of black ore over the side, a deliberate and visible waste designed to cement the illusion. From a distance, the message crackled back to Moscow. American miners testing new gear, nothing suspicious. The most audacious deception of the Cold War was holding. Then came the 4th of July, 1974, a day of celebration across America. But here, in the silent expanse of the ocean, the only fireworks were the sparks of tension in the control room. The Glomar Explorer halted its majestic progress, its engines falling silent. It was now a fixed point in a liquid universe, positioned with unnerving precision directly above the tomb of the Soviet submarine K-129. The stage was set. The abyss was waiting. With a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the entire vessel, the massive doors in the ship's hull, the moon pool, parted. The dark, cold Pacific rushed in, flooding the cavernous central bay, turning the heart of the ship into a gateway to the deep. The engineers, a mix of apprehension and steely resolve, began the agonizingly slow process of lowering their weapon. The colossal claw, codenamed Clementine, began its journey into oblivion. It descended at a pace that defied urgency, a mere foot per second. A glacial descent that meant the journey to the ocean floor, 3 miles down, would consume 8 full hours. 8 hours of silence. 8 hours of waiting. 8 hours where a single mechanical failure would mean the end of everything. 12,000 feet below the waves, the mission nearly died. A section of the immense pipe string twisted, a fatal kink threatening the entire fragile lifeline to the surface. In the control room, a cathedral of quiet focus, the only sound was the frantic scratch of needles on strain gauges. They spiked into the red, a violent, jagged line charting a course toward catastrophic failure. The entire weight of the mission, the hopes of the intelligence community, now hung by a single, overstressed thread of steel. The descent was slowed to a crawl, the crew working meticulously, coaxing the machinery inch by agonizing inch. For 90 torturous minutes, the fate of Project Azorian was in doubt. Then, as slowly as the crisis had begun, the gauges steadied. A collective, silent sigh of relief swept through the room. Clementine resumed its downward journey, a silent predator hunting in the crushing dark. Finally, the sonar painted a picture on the screens, an unmistakable silhouette, the K-129. It lay on its starboard side, a fallen Titan, its towned the submarine's hull, 209 feet aft of the sail. The exact point where intelligence analysts had predicted the hull would be at its strongest. There was no margin for error. At these depths, where the pressure would pulp a human body in an instant, there could be no second chances. This grab had to be perfect. Cameras mounted on Clementine fed grainy, ghostly footage back to the monitors above. The crew watched as metal creaked under immense force. Sediment, undisturbed, ocked into place. The grab was made. The lift began. For 2 agonizing days, the winches hauled, their motors straining against a weight that defied imagination. The steel pipe groaned, a constant, deep thrum of a structure under almost unbearable stress. Slowly, deliberately, a precious section of the enemy submarine began its ascent. A 40-foot piece of the bow, containing 2 nuclear missile tubes, and, most critically, the prize that had justified this entire monumental effort, the code room. The secrets of the deep were rising toward the light. The ocean does not yield its secrets easily. For every foot gained, the sea exacts a price in pressure, in darkness, in the slow grinding physics of the abyss. For the men of the Glomar Explorer, this was a battle fought in vertical miles, a slow-motion heist from the bottom of the world. They were winning, inch by agonizing inch. Then, at a depth of 5,200 feet, the abyss struck back. It began not with a roar, but with a sound that did not belong. A single, sharp, matiere world to the one below. On the surface, engineers froze. They knew that sound. It was the shriek of tortured steel, the sound of failure. One of the massive claws of the capture vehicle, a Titan's hand codenamed Clementine, had fractured, a single steel finger surrendering to a weight it was never meant to release. Seconds later, two more, a cascade of catastrophic fractures, a chain reaction of defeat written in shearing metal. The dream was over. Two-thirds of the Soviet submarine, the K-129, the grand prize of the Cold War, simply let go. It tilted, then plunged. A vast metal coffin returning to its grave, trailing a ghostly comet's tail of debris. It was falling back into the crushing dark, destined for a second, and this time, permanent, resting place. Inside the mission control trailer, the air became thick, unbreathable. A stunned, absolute silence descended, a vacuum where moments before there had been the hum of machinery and quiet confidence. It was broken by a single, hushed whisper over the comms, a chilling, three-word epitaph for the most audacious intelligence operation in history. We just lost her. The hope of recovering the entire submarine, with its full arsenal of nuclear missiles and its trove of cryptographic secrets, had evaporated into the cold Pacific water. What remained, dangling from the crippled claw, was a cruel fragment of their ambition. The forward 38 feet of the wreck, a fraction of the target, a consolation prize from the deep. Yet this prize was far from empty. Within that mangled tube of steel lay a wealth of intelligence. Torpedoes, a single empty missile tube, and, most critically, the ship's cryptographic safe. The haul, when finally catalogued, would fill 45 plain cardboard boxes. A mundane vessel for the most extraordinary secrets. Inside, codebooks, their pages waterlogged and fragile as ancient parchment, were painstakingly recovered. Torpedo guidance systems offered a priceless glimpse into the mind of Soviet weapons designers. And then they found something else, something they had prepared for, but nothing could truly prepare them for. The bodies of 6 Soviet sailors. The abyssal cold had acted as a form of strange, perfect preservation, freezing them in time at the moment of their doom. The mission had now crossed a line, from espionage to archaeology, from a technical challenge to a solemn human duty. Protocol, even in the shadow world of spies, demanded respect for the dead. These men were the enemy, but they were sailors first. Their bodies were carefully, respectfully placed into heavy metal coffins. In a gesture of almost surreal honor, the crew of the Glomar Explorer's laundry painstakingly sewed Soviet naval ensigns to drape over them. A Russian-speaking officer on board recorded a short, somber, Orthodox prayer, a final benediction for souls lost in the silent deep. At dawn, on a calm Pacific morning, the sky was a clean slate, untouched by the drama that had unfolded beneath it. One by one, the coffins slid silently from the deck, returning the sailors to the sea. A lone bugler played, not one anthem, but 2. The haunting melody En Brise, in the middle of a secret war. On the deck, a handful of CIA officers watched this profoundly moving and entirely clandestine ceremony. They had reached for a Titan and captured only a ghost. But in honoring these 6 fallen sailors, they had salvaged something else from the abyss. A quiet, unrecorded act of grace, played out on an empty ocean, witnessed by no one, and remembered only by a chosen few. The ceremony itself remains a ghost in the archives, an event still classified to this very day. A final, solemn rite performed on the deck of an American ship, under a foreign flag, for sailors of a rival nation. Years later, in 1992, footage of this unique burial at sea would be quietly delivered to Moscow. It was a profound gesture of goodwill in a world struggling to redefine itself after the Cold War. A final chapter offering a measure of closure to a mystery that had haunted 2 superpowers. But long before this gesture of peace, back in the cold heart of Washington, the real work had just begun. Beneath the sterile lights of a secure facility, the recovered Soviet codebooks were treated not as paper, but as priceless artifacts. Saturated with the deep ocean, their pages were a fused, fragile mass. Inside specialized vacuum chambers, technicians began a process of technological resurrection. With painstaking precision, moisture was drawn out, and the pages were gently peeled apart, revealing secrets that had been submerged in darkness for 6 long years. What they found was a revelation. Cipher settings that were still current and would remain so for another 6 months. It was a ghost key to the enemy's mind, a narrow but critical window into the secret traffic of the Soviet Navy. This intelligence was more than valuable. It was a direct line into the strategic thinking of an adversary. Elsewhere, a team of engineers performed a meticulous autopsy on the R-21 missile engine. Every valve, every weld, every component was disassembled and scrutinized. Their findings recalibrated America's understanding of the threat. Soviet solid-fuel technology, while undeniably formidable, was years behind the designs pioneered in the West. The intelligence haul was not the grand prize they had dreamed of, the complete nuclear arsenal, but it was far from a failure. It provided something just as crucial: clarity, a tangible measure of Soviet capabilities, and just as important, their limitations. For years, the vast, audacious undertaking of Project Azorian remained one of the most perfectly guarded secrets of the Cold War. A phantom operation hidden in plain sight. But secrets of this magnitude have a gravity of their own. They pull at the fabric of silence, seeking the light. In 1975, the dam finally broke. The breach came not from a spy or a defector, but from an investigative columnist named Jack Anderson. A relentless journalist, feared and respected in Washington for his ability to unearth what others wanted buried. Standing before the Washington Press Club, he dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. His words, precise and damning, echoed across the nation. The CIA has been running a seagoing swindle involving Howard Hughes and a sunken Russian submarine. Anderson was not guessing. He had sources. He had proof. A meticulously detailed 20-page briefing memo, pilfered during a brazen break-in at the Summa Corporation, Howard Hughes's own holding company. The story rocketed across front pages worldwide, igniting a firestorm of speculation and outrage. Congress, kept completely in the dark, was incensed. The clandestine nature of the operation, its staggering cost, and its immense risk, all conducted without oversight, triggered immediate demands for hearings. The director of the CIA, William Colby, found himself in an impossible position. He was trapped. To confirm the story would be to expose a highly sensitive and ongoing intelligence method, compromising future operations and burning priceless assets. To deny it would be to lie under oath before Congress, a career-ending act of perjury. It was in this crucible of pressure, caught between national security and political survival, that Colby forged a new shield. A phrase so simple, yet so profound, it would embed itself into the very language of power. When asked directly about the Hughes Glomar Explorer and its true purpose, Colby responded with the immortal words, "We can neither confirm nor deny." The Kremlin's response was swift, delivered through its ambassador, Anatoly Dobrinin. A formal protest was filed, a document seething with diplomatic fury. But beneath the anger was a deep, burning embarrassment. They had been outmaneuvered, their sacred naval tomb disturbed, and now the entire world knew it. The phrase born of Colby's dilemma would outlive the operation itself. It became the official ghost of Project Azorian, an admission of silence that speaks volumes, echoing the deep, cold quiet from which the secret first emerged. In the silent, wood-paneled offices of the Kremlin, a suspicion hardened into a certainty. They knew. Or at least, they felt it in the cold, hollow space where facts should have been. The Americans had reached into the abyss and tried to steal their ghost. A sunken submarine, a tomb of Soviet sailors, had been desecrated by their Cold War rival. But this knowledge was a poison with no antidote. Without a single photograph, without a piece of twisted metal, without the hard, undeniable evidence that could survive the brutal scrutiny of international law, Moscow was powerless. Their protests were met with blank stares, their accusations with carefully worded denials. They could not prove a thing, and the United States government was a fortress of silence. The architect of this impossible feat, the Hughes Glomar Explorer, had its cover blown. Its mission, a partial success shrouded in total failure, was over. The great ship, once the centerpiece of the most audacious intelligence operation in history, was quietly laid up, a giant without a purpose. It was eventually sold to a drilling contractor, its secret life erased from the ship's log. Its days as a weapon of espionage were done. And Clementine, the colossal, custom-built claw designed to grasp a nuclear submarine from 3 miles beneath the waves, was condemned to an even more ignominious fate. This marvel of engineering, this hand of a titan, was systematically dismembered. Cut into anonymous sections of scrap steel, its pieces were scattered across forgotten warehouses, a deliberate act of erasing the evidence. The most ambitious heist of its time vanished into a fog of bureaucracy, its memory relegated to the whispered legends of spies and analysts. Project Azorian was a monument to obsession. The cost was a figure that bordered on the abstract: $800 million. In the currency of 1974, this was a sum so vast it eclipsed the entire budget for the Apollo 14 lunar program. Consider that. The political will, the national treasure, the sheer engineering genius required to send men to walk on the surface of the moon, was less than what the Central Intelligence Agency was willing to spend to steal a single enemy submarine from the crushing darkness of the ocean floor. It was an astronomical investment, a silent testament to the secrets the K-129 was believed to hold. Yet from the ashes of this covert operation, an unexpected legacy emerged. The technology forged in secrecy would revolutionize industries working in the light. The dynamic positioning system, perfected to hold the Glomar Explorer perfectly stationary against the fury of Pacific currents, became a global standard for offshore oil rigs, unlocking reserves once thought unreachable. The moon pool, the ship's hollow heart, a secret chamber designed to swallow a piece of the submarine away from the prying eyes of satellites, is now a foundational concept in today's most advanced drill ships. It allows for safer, more efficient operations in the planet's most hostile marine environments. The very idea of deep-sea mining, once a plausible lie to mask the mission's true intent, was propelled forward by the engineering breakthroughs Azorian demanded. The cover story became a catalyst for reality. But perhaps the most enduring echo of Project Azorian is not made of steel, but of words. A 5-word phrase born from a director's desperate scramble to protect a secret that was already unraveling. We can neither confirm nor deny. Today, that phrase is a cornerstone of government communication, a shield used by law enforcement and intelligence agencies worldwide. Every time a spokesperson utters those 5 familiar words, the ghost of the K-129 stirs. It is a subtle, constant reminder of the incredible lengths nations will go to guard their secrets, and the ingenious linguistic tools they invent to do so. While declassified documents occasionally trickle out, slowly illuminating fragments of the puzzle, the complete story remains locked away. Many files are sealed until the year 2039, perpetuating the mystery for another generation. And so, to this day, private treasure hunters and rogue explorers still scour the vast, empty charts of the Pacific. They dream of finding the missing section of the lost submarine, the final piece of a story that began in the crushing dark, 3 miles down. A story of a secret that was almost stolen, and a suspicion that became a certainty. The ghost of the K-129 still haunts the abyssal plain, its remaining secrets guarded by 3 miles of crushing black water. Yet the nuclear specter that once terrified a generation has long since faded. Scientists agree, the unforgiving deep has worked its slow chemistry, corroding warheads into little more than harmless titanium slag. The ocean has reclaimed its threat. The mission's true epitaph is not written on the seabed. It resides far from the Pacific, within the quiet, secured halls of Langley. There, for a select few to witness, rests a single, tortured piece of metal. A mangled finger from the Clementine claw, violently bent during that fateful, failed ascent. A humble, silent testament to an impossible ambition. To the moment America reached into the heart of the abyss and almost stole a secret from the cold, dead hands of its rival.